is the Stagger Podcast.
Those guys are idiots.
Welcome into the Stagger Podcast. What is up? I am JD Smith.
Hey, what's up, guys? I am Derrick Smith, and I'm ready to go for Daytona round 2.
Yeah, we got a month of Daytona, which I don't disagree with. I think it's a great idea having the, obviously the 500, and now we've got the road course. So this is something we've thought about doing a little bit more of. We're going to try it out, see what you guys think of this episode. If you like it, please let us know on Twitter at Stagger Podcast. Of course, you can also get to us on Instagram, TikTok. We have a YouTube channel now, all of them by searching Stagger Podcast. You can find all those. It's all there. We're getting multimedia, international. That's what I said. That's what I heard.
International.
Yeah, we're doing all the above. So, but yeah,
we got Russian listeners. We do.
Yeah, we have someone who gave us a review in Germany. So we're getting extremely international, which is
Das
cool.
ist gut, yeah.
Which is
I
good.
hope.
Yeah, I hope. I think so. The review said we were good, so I'll
It'd be bad
take
if they like cussed us out in German, like, "Hey, you guys are the worst, terrible, most fantastically bad show on the planet."
Yeah, well, we'll take reviews from everywhere, including you. So if you like this, make sure you leave us a review, especially if you listen on the Apple Podcast app. Just hit the podcast and then rate it. Give us 5 stars if you could, and leave us a rating. That'll help people find the podcast. But today what we're doing is just more of a fantasy gambling-oriented show. It's not going to be very long, and we're just going to talk about the Daytona Road Course for the Cup Series. To give you a few ideas of what to be thinking here, it's a different package for the road course this season than last season. Last season, they ran the not high horsepower package, the 550 engine package versus the 750 horsepower package. And they ran the lower spoiler, but they also run the lower motor. Now they're giving you the lower spoilers and the big motor, and it's on Daytona. So you saw this already in the Clash. So when you saw some of how squirrely some of those cars were getting coming out of the bus stop and at some of the other parts of the track, that is due to the fact they're putting down a lot more horsepower in this race than they even were last year when they ran this. So keep that in mind when you look at the results from last year, because it's a different package. So that might affect a few of the guys anyway who did really well last year may not do as well this time around. But any thoughts on that before we get going, Derrick, as far as what you think with that?
I mean, I think if you're looking for strictly a fantasy racing information, the cool thing is that that sounded really weird. But the cool thing is that you get the opportunity to look at road course racing. There's always chaos. There's always a chance for the improbable to happen. You could find yourself having a one-off driver. And it's weird to say like a one-off driver is AJ Almandinger, but that's a possibility. He's one of the top-rated DraftKings drivers this week because he is going off, I believe. I just saw him. Well, shoot, he's already on my lineup. But he's in like 10,400. And the highest guy is 11,000. That's Martin Truex Jr. Yeah. So, I mean, he's up there.
He's a top 5 driver as far as cost goes on DraftKings, which is where we get all of our values from. You can certainly... If you use FanDuel, I mean, they're probably similar, but we just go off DraftKings. That's what we use. So no offense to the FanDuel people. DraftKings is just what we have. But yeah, so that's something that's a good point, is that AJ Allmendinger is going to be expensive this weekend, but he is also going to be very good this weekend, we presume. All right, so let's talk quickly before we get into all the guys we want to have in our lineup. Let's talk about what last year was. Here's their top 10 from the only other road course race we've had other than the Busch Clash at Daytona for the Cup cars. Last year, Chase Elliott won this race. Denny Hamlin was second. Martin Truex Jr. was third. Jimmy Johnson in the 48 car was fourth. Chris Buescher in the 17 came in fifth. Clint Bowyer in the 14 was sixth. Kaz Grala had to fill in for Austin Dillon last year, and he had a tremendous run because old Dilly had a little COVID, so he couldn't participate. But that's all right. He's all back on the mend. He will be driving Austin Dillon, the 3-car, this time around. William Byron, Joey Logano, and some guy named Michael McDowell finished out your top 10 there in last year, which, again, we said that was a little different package than what we have this year. Top 10 from the Busch Clash, just to give you an idea, as I'm sure most of you are familiar, but it was Kyle Busch winning that one after, of course, Chase Elliott wrecked his good buddy Ryan Blaney. Chase finished second. Joey Logano finished third. Tyler Reddick was 4th. William Byron was 5th. Denny Hamlin was 6th. And in that 48 car that finished top 5 last time, it was top 10 finish for Alex Bowman now driving that car. Eric Jones in the 43, Ricky Stenhouse in the 47, and Matt DiBenedetto in the 21 car rounded out your top 10 from the Busch Clash. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the guy who finished 5th in last year's run. That was Chris Buescher. You are very excited about Mr. Buescher getting in there.
I absolutely am, and I'll tell you why. Because he not only did he run top 5 last year, now he didn't have the best Busch Clash, but I'm not going to hold that against him because he is going off at 7,200, starting in the 30th position. So even if he only betters his spot by, say, 10 or 15 spots, he gets a top 15 finish. That's plus 15 on your points already. Whereas some of these guys that you got to look at, like Bubba Wallace, going off at, what is he at 10th position? And you've got Austin Dillon, who has a good car from last year. That car performed well, going off at 3rd. Ross Chastain going off at 9th. These are all value players in that high 6s, low 7 range. And they don't really they have to keep a top 10 to really keep their points up.
Yeah.
Chris Buescher's just got to push forward. And I think he's a smart driver. He rarely wrecks. So I think he's just going to survive the melees if he can. And he's going to get a top 15, maybe even another top 10 finish.
I will say, I think
5, but I think he's going to be a solid player for your roster. And if you're building out and saying how far can I go with my top end guys, you got to get the floor first. That's how I go with it.
Well, that's an interesting thing because I was going to talk strategy here because there is that angle of it, right? Where to win on DraftKings, you've got to have a few guys who are passing cars. But the temptation can certainly be, and especially after the first week of Daytona you think about it, man, there are so many good road course racers and just really good equipment guys who have driven this course really well before, who are going to be starting sub 25th. I mean, they're going to be back in the back half of the field easily. That you can find a lot of guys that are expensive and they're going to have a lot of cars to pass, which will get them points. But you're right. You have to balance that idea between how many of those guys. You don't want to have just a whole lineup of guys starting, 35th, 36th, 37th, and then say, oh, they're going to all pass cars. Well, no, they may wear out their equipment doing that. They may have to come to pit road a little earlier or, gain some time on pit road. That might lead to a speeding penalty. They might miss the chicane at one point and then they have to take a penalty. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you got to factor in there. So it's getting that balance of guys who are going to be up front versus guys who are going to have a good equipment and pass a lot of cars. So that's the kind of rub when you go to a road course like this, which brings us to an interesting person. I want to ask your thoughts on this. What do you do with AJ Allmendinger? Because, as you mentioned, he is going to be a costly add to your roster if you want to. He is a $10,000 driver in this particular scenario. He is one of the top 5 most expensive on DraftKings. Rolls off 34th because obviously he's not running a full-time schedule and the points that you're getting in on are basically non-existent. So he'll have a lot of cars to pass, but this is that kind of strategy thing we're talking about. What do you think about putting AJ Allmendinger in your lineup as your number 1 guy, your hammer in this lineup? What do you think about that?
I think that anyone that's going to win the big money is going to have AJ Allmendinger in their lineup. Now, with
really,
that
you think
said,
so? You think they will?
I think so because he'll get a top 10 finish. I'll be shocked if he doesn't. So he's going to get a top 10 finish. That's a plus 24 on your rankings, let alone if he leads some laps, does the fastest lap a few times, and then the positional ranking of just being a 10th place car or 5th place car. So he's going to have the ability, I think, to really perform, really get out there and make a lot of points. So to me, you've got a steady Eddie who's starting 30th, Chris Buescher, who could be a top 15 guy. Now you've got AJ Allmendinger. So I'm kind of building my guys up from the back of the field. I will say that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I look at AJ Allmendinger and here's the question I have with him. Obviously, knowing the equipment he had when he was in the Cup Series, he had good equipment. It was not great equipment. And obviously, I think he's used to running with mid-pack equipment and then making that on a road course stand up and being there at the finish, right? So that is something in his plus column. However, like, if you look at his Xfinity runs that he has done, he's been, really great in these road course, offerings whenever he runs the Xfinity series. I don't think his advantage is the same in the Cup Series anymore. I think the Cup Series drivers, even from when he was running Cup full time a few years ago, I think the Cup Series drivers have vastly improved on the road course. And so you got to think, man, you're going to be paying like you can have Chase Elliott, you can have Ryan Blaney, you can have Martin Truex Jr., you can have all these guys who are really good on the road courses, and they've proven it. And in Ryan Blaney's case, he's starting 27th. So if you want someone who's going to pass a lot of cars and who has all the equipment, I mean, Ryan Blaney is definitely, I think that's the argument you can go with there is you go with Dinger, you go with Ryan Blaney.
Oh boy, put this in my car. I have next on my list Ryan Blaney rolling off at 27th at $10,400. Yes, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have AJ Allmendinger and Ryan Blaney in this
I'm
lineup.
really terrified by what the rest of your lineup's going to look like.
Oh, just you wait, man.
Okay, all right. So you give me your lineup so far. You've given me Ryan Blaney. You've given me AJ Allmendinger. You've given me Chris Buescher. Who else have you added on? Who you have 3 more spots to fill.
So now is where, like, if you don't start with the literal floor, like I put someone who's he's the second lowest driver on my list, right?
Who's that?
With Chris Buescher.
Okay,
so
Chris
I had to
Buescher,
find someone
right.
who was gonna. I had to counterbalance the 2 $10,000 plus drivers, right? So this is where I threw in Daniel Suarez, 35th, rolls off 35th place. He's got Toyota engine, so he will have some horsepower on the high banks to make up for maybe some lack of performance in the infield. But I do want to share with you this information, because if you look back to 2020, I know it's a different package, but what he has and what he can bring to the table is that he finished 27th last year. Now, that's not anything to write home about. But if he finishes and just replicates that, you're getting almost plus 10 points and a position change from him going 35th to 27th. And I think he's in better equipment this year than he was last year.
How much does he cost you, just for comparative purposes?
$5,700.
Okay.
So I've got 4 drivers, and I've got $1,650 left. Sorry, $1,500, $16,500 left on my budget.
16,500.
16,500 on my budget.
2 drivers left. All right. So do you have the other 2 spots filled? Because I can tell you my list while you're filling yours out. Let me see what you think.
I already have them filled out.
Okay, go ahead. Tell me who's left.
I've got a guy rolling off 24th, Tyler Reddick, coming in at 7,500.
I like that pick a lot. I have Tyler Reddick in my lineup as well. I think he's a great value pick to this weekend, especially.
Absolutely. He's rolling off in the iFantasyRace.com speed rankings. He's got the 4th highest average speed rank of all the drivers from the Busch Clash.
From the Busch Clash,
yeah, from the Busch Clash just a few weeks ago. So he's going to be a guy, I think, that he's just in this position because of his finish with the 500. So this is going to be a great chance to make potentially another 10 to 15 points if he gets a top 5 finish, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got, like you said, I mean, he's coming from the mid-20s, so he's going to have a bunch of cars to pass too. Now, again, you got to balance that with guys who are also going to be guaranteed to be up front, so or should be starting in the top 10 and hopefully can avoid, a backup, say on the first. If there's some kind of mishap on the first lap, you might have 7 cars get dinged up pretty good, have to make multiple stops. That could really wreck your day. So you got to hope that if you've got multiple guys starting P20 or beyond, then you got to hope they get clean through the first few laps and then they can start just checking boxes and passing cars. Because Tyler Reddick should have the speed, though. You're right. The 3 car was fast last year. We saw that what Kaz Grala did with it. It's the same team, obviously, and his car was fast in the Busch Clash, and he was able to keep that position and stay high up there, top 5.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Tyler Reddick was very fast. I agree with you on that. I think as long as he can get through the traffic, he's a good pick. So who's your last guy you've got?
Well, at $9,000 left to play with, I'm going to go ahead and leave $0 in my budget. Now, last year you said there was a top 5 finisher. He's no longer in NASCAR. His name's Jimmy Johnson. Drives the 48. Who happens to drive the 48 this year? Just so happens to be Alex Bowman. Finished 7th in the Daytona Busch Clash just a few weeks ago and rolls off 36th.
Yeah.
So, yeah, while you say I might need someone to start in the top 10, you're right, but the top 10 is filled with Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Austin Dillon, Michael McDowell, who might be a good play.
Yeah, well,
but sorry. Go ahead and keep your guys up there. I'm going to go with some of the guys that are going to make tons of gains. If this is where you lay it all out and you put your what's on the line, whatever what's are, if you put that on the line, this is the race to do it.
Yeah.
Because
so who do you have? Who do you have starting? Do you have anyone in your starting lineup starting in the top 10?
No. The closest I have to starting in the top 10 is Tyler Reddick rolling off at 24.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So that is, I will just say, for those people who are looking at your lineup, that is one of the flaws of what you've built there. Although I don't think look, you're taking a big swing. That is one that for sure has a lot of potential. I am not denying that strategy is very tasty. All right. There's a lot to like about that. In fact, I like it so much, I'm going to take a break so we can process it. And then when we come back, I'll give you my starting lineup for your fantasy NASCAR this weekend. You're listening to the Stagger Podcast. Welcome back to the Stagger Podcast. Now, let's say that for you, perhaps your strategy is not to go with a bunch of guys who are going to be at the back of the field the entire day. Maybe you want someone who is just going to roll off and possibly win the race, someone who's going to roll off with the fastest or one of the 3 or 4 fastest cars in the field, and someone who has proven they can dominate at every level on the road courses. Well, that would be young Chase Elliott, right? And so yes. I'm going to start my lineup with the guy who is sitting on the pole, who is the best driver on the road courses right now in the Cup Series. He has proven it at every level. And yeah, he drove the wheels off that thing, wrecked his good buddy in the Busch Clash, but his car was fast. And that was the Busch Clash. He's not going to do that in a race. I don't think he's going to do that. If he's in the same spot going into this race and the Busch Clash had never happened, he's going to let Ryan Blaney win that race. He's going to be satisfied with a second place finish because he's running for points. It's a totally different ball game. So Chase Elliott will click off some fastest laps. He will click off absolutely, probably a top 3 finish, if not a win. So you're going to be in the points with him. So I'm starting my lineup there. Interestingly enough, you and I have quite a few similarities, or we have some that we agree on majorly. Like, I also agree with you on Ryan Blaney, although I'm going with Chase Elliott as my number 1 guy. And I'm not putting a Daniel Suarez in my lineup. But the cheapest guy I have in my lineup, I went no cheaper than $6,500. So every guy in my lineup is, mid-tier to expensive. We'll put it that way. The other guys that I have, we had similar. You mentioned Alex Bowman. I have him in my lineup for $9,000. I have Tyler Reddick in my lineup for $7,500. We covered why we like those guys. Now, let me give you 3 that you did not mention. Or actually, you mentioned 2 of these guys. But I'll give you 3 guys that I am targeting that you did not. One is Ross Chastain, who you mentioned, rolling off 9th. Ross Chastain does not run terribly at road courses. He's actually a pretty solid road course racer, or at least he was in the Xfinity Series. And I think the Xfinity cars do compare similarly as far as the way they drive, the way they're going to drive compared to what this package does now at Daytona. I think they're going to be very similar. So guys who ran well, they're like Dinger, and obviously like Ross Chastain, I think they're both going to be okay. If you look at last year's August race at Daytona, he finished in the 30s. He had a mechanical issue, so that I don't put on him as much. So I think Ross Chastain will be able to keep and hold a top 10 finish. By the way, $6,500. He's a pretty cheap option to give you a hopefully top 10, top 15, right? I mean, yes, he's not going to pass a ton of cars. I wouldn't anticipate, but if he can keep his position, I think that's a solid play. The other guy that you mentioned is the guy who just won the race last week. And I know this week on NASCAR Twitter, it's been nothing but hatred in this way for Michael McDowell, which I know you're a fan of because you don't really like Michael McDowell. He's not your guy, but you're
all right.
You're a Bubba guy. You're a Bubba guy.
I'm a Love's truck stop guy. It's my favorite truck stop, so I stand with him on that.
No love for the pilot Flying J. That all right.
It's okay. Fine. Have you been in their bathrooms?
I don't go to a lot of truck stop bathrooms.
Not the best.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I know it's been a while since you traveled because of the pandemic, but they're not the best.
Here's my reasoning on Michael McDowell. there are a lot of people who are like, because I've seen more than a few people post here, this guy, in all the love he gets for being a good road course racer, he has one top 10 finish in the last 27 road course races on the NASCAR circuit that he's participated in. So I think some people are down on that and saying, well, so he's not as good as we thought. Well, let's also keep in mind, he's usually running equipment that qualifies you bottom, 20, 25, maybe even 30, if they qualify, which of course they did up until last year. So he's had to come through a lot of traffic too, right? So this is a guy who does have to do that on the regular. He's sitting second this time around. So I have the number 1 and number 2 starters in this race. I would hope that between the two of those guys, I should get some fastest laps, and I should be able to get a top 10 finish out of McDowell. That's my bet. And by the way, if I said I could get a top 10 finish for a guy who's running $6,800, that's what he costs right now. Like, if he was back in, 25th, then I would feel differently, because I still think it will be tough for him to maybe move up. But, he is going to be a guy who I think getting out there and having the ability to not have to deal with a lot of traffic is going to keep his nose clean and allow him to just run his race. And we've really never seen Michael McDowell start off second at a road course. So I'm going to take a flyer on a $6,800 guy who's starting outside pole, see what he can do with it. But
I mean, it's a risk.
It's a risk. It's a risk. But I'm willing. But it's no more of a risk than you taking Daniel Suarez, who is not a great road course racer and is starting back in the 30s or 28th or something.
Hey, but this year he's got Pitbull on his side.
Hey, I'm looking forward to him. I'm looking forward to him at 1.5 miles. I really do want to see what that team can do on the ovals, but I don't think he's going to be great on this road course. I have to say.
I was joking about Pitbull, but this is for real. You have one of the best stock car road racers as his team owner. You don't think Justin Marks is going to give some pointers?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
To Daniel Suarez that could be. I mean, it could be game changer.
Let me tell you something. It really could. If Justin Marks was driving that car, I would feel a lot better about it. I'll be honest, because Justin Marks is a wheel man. He's great on that.
It could put him to where he's a top 20, which if you put him in a top 20 position, that's a win for that team that's building a program. And that's also a win as a fantasy player, getting plus 15 on position.
Yeah,
I think that's a huge win for $5,700 too.
Yeah, that's fair.
To me, there's just too many variables with that.
I get
those guys up front, and I would fade Bubba Wallace. I would fade Martin Truex Jr.
Oh, really?
I know he's really fast and he's starting 19th, but there's something about him. He just does not. I don't trust him in a road course car.
Would you fade Kyle? Would you fade Kyle Busch in this race? He looked pretty good.
14th. I actually in my second.
He's going to cost you a lot. He's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, but he did win that race, and he's Kyle. He's KFB, man. You can't drop the hammer on him without. Yeah, I will say this. Let me pull it up here on my second lineup. I went a little off the board here. I went James Davison at 39.
Okay. All right. The IndyCar driver.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tyler Reddick, William Byron starting 22nd.
Oh, Willie B's a really good option too.
$8,800. Yeah. Then I got Kyle Busch, Chris Buescher, and AJ Allmendinger. The Dinger.
Yeah. I will tell you, if you're looking at Tyler Reddick, or if you do your lineup and you're like, man, I have a lot of money left over. I actually put Tyler Reddick in here, but I'd like someone else who maybe is a little more expensive. And I just, maybe, you're not a big fan of Tyler Reddick for whatever reason. William Byron is a similar profile there of a guy who's starting in the mid-20s, was a top 5 car last time around at the Busch Clash, and he's more expensive. That's why I went with Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick on the reverse of that, if you have William Byron and you're looking to shave $1,000 off your lineup, go with Tyler Reddick. He's going to probably be a similar, those two are very similar, but the money's very different on those two of those guys. But here's a name we haven't talked about, and he's a rookie. He has no real, anything in the Cup Series to look at here. $8,400 on DraftKings. And I with my lineup that I put together, I still have $1,000 left over. I could easily sub out guys, but $8,400, Chase Briscoe, rolling off 18th. Now let's talk about Chase Briscoe, because that 14 car, Clint Boyer was in it last year, and it was a top 10 car last year. It was really good. And then he had Chase Briscoe, a great Xfinity race last year, but he got bundled up in a wreck. But him and Austin Cindric were battling it out, just like they did at the Indy road course. I mean, he's fantastic on the road courses. He is a wheelman's wheelman. Chase Briscoe is great. He's starting 18th, so not too high, not too low. I could see him easily working his way up to top 10 or even top 5, depending on how his day goes. But yeah, $8,400 to get a guy who's probably going to finish your top 10, pass some cars, and I think be a factor. Go ahead and sign me up. I think a lot of people will look at Chase Briscoe and say, I don't know, I'm not sure. He's an easy play for me. So let's real quick run through our lineups, and then I'll give you a quick couple of odds on the gambling tip. But my lineup again is Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman. I'm Chase and Chase. Chase Elliott, Chase Briscoe, Alex Bowman, Tyler Reddick. My 2 flyers are Michael McDowell at $6,800 and Ross Chastain at $6,500, and both those guys are starting in the top 10. Now, your lineup again is for your main lineup?
For my main lineup, I have AJ Almandinger, Ryan Blaney, Alex Bowman, Chris Boucher,
That's
Tyler
your flyer.
Reddick, and Daniel Suarez.
Boucher and Suarez are your flyers for show. But all right, yeah, that's a pretty good lineup. Last thing,
I guess the highest starting position of my lineup is 24th. I guess you could technically say I'm taking a flyer on the whole lineup, hoping that at least 5 of them will get top 15s.
Sure, I understand that. Real quick, I'll give you, these are the race-winning odds that were put out that I saw earlier this week. Chase Elliott, your favorite, at 2-1. Martin Truex Jr. 4-1. Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney at 10-1. Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick 12-1. The Dinger, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, all 14-1. Byron at 20-1. Bowman 25-1, along with Kyle Larson. Kurt Busch at 28-1. Chase Briscoe 50-1. I like them odds a lot. 50-1 on Chase Briscoe.
Drive to Indiana odds.
Those are if you want to take look, the guys that you should, if you're in a state where you can bet legally and you're looking for a pretty good investment or return, Denny Hamlin 10-1, Ryan Blaney 10-1, Kyle Busch 12, or Kevin Harvick 12-1. Those are all 4 solid plays. Obviously, Chase is going to be you're not going to get much back on that if he wins. Those guys are good plays, I would say. If you want to take a flyer, Chase Briscoe at 50-1 is excellent. I'll give you 2 more.
We need to call like if we have a flyer or like one that we would like, I would lay down $10 on that.
Yeah.
We need to call it like something like the Larry Bird special or the Mike Pence special. Indiana people.
Oh, well, that's just for you and me, because we don't live in a state that's smart. We live in a state where you can't bet, so we have to drive. And Indiana is the closest drive for you and me, but for other people, it might be Pennsylvania bet. So it might, I don't know. It might be the Mike Schmidt for Pennsylvania.
It could be the Mike Schmidt or the Lenny Dykstra.
The Dykstra. Yeah, that's right. Lenny Dykstra would be great. Yeah. So all I know is Michael McDowell at 80-1 is he's starting second and he's 80-1. I mean, that's kind of weird, right? Like, we acknowledge that
people don't have faith, man. They don't have faith.
I understand that. I'm just saying, like, I think everybody's being a little too smart on him. It's probably not likely, and I don't think, dude, if lightning struck twice, the most ridiculous story of all would be Michael McDowell wins 2 races in a row in a NASCAR series, but they are the Daytona. Both of them are at Daytona. Would just be unreal. But 80-1 odds, I mean, good Lord. Throw $10 on it and see what happens if you're in that spot. I mean, I think that's a pretty good one to look at. So
apparently Michael McDowell has not been talking enough in his career about faith and about faith in him as a driver. So I think that's what he needs to start spending his time in interviews. The throwaway time he has at the beginning and end, he should really talk more about loves, travel stops, and then having faith.
That's right. But just in him, he's apparently needs to believe in me. No one does. No one believes in him this weekend, even though he just won last weekend. And I think it's fairly unlikely, but still, decent play in your lineup. Decent play in your lineup if you're looking at daily fantasy. So,
will we call him Mr. Daytona if that happened? Mr. COVID-Tona.
We'd have to call him something. If you win 2 races in a row at Daytona, I think you get something put on a trophy. You get some names.
We would just call him Michael Waltrip.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, buddy. That's it for us. Thank you guys for checking this out. Enjoy the race this weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday. don't forget, if you're an IndyCar fan, if you're an IMSA fan, we will have stuff for you because it's been a lot of NASCAR the last few weeks, but we're not forgetting about IndyCar. We'll have plenty to talk about next week as well on that. But that's it for us this week. Till next time, stay safe and stay staggered.